The food court of Riverside Mall buzzed with the chaos of a typical Saturday afternoon. Trays clanged, children shrieked, and 100 conversations blended into one constant hum of noise. But in the middle of it all, one question cut through the chaos like a whisper that echoed in someone's soul. "Can I share this table?" Marcus Williams looked up from his cold cup of coffee. He was 61 years old. His janitor uniform was slightly wrinkled from the 12-hour shift he had just finished. His hands, rough and calloused from years of mopping floors, scrubbing toilets, and fixing things no one else wanted to touch, were wrapped around the cup like it was the only warmth he had left in the world. And then he saw her. A young woman, maybe 22, 23 at most. She stood before him with a gentle smile, balancing a tray of food on one hand. Her hair was dark brown, pulled back in a loose ponytail. Her eyes were the color of warm honey, and beneath her floral dress, where her left leg should have been, there was a prosthetic limb, sleek, modern, but unmistakably artificial. Marcus felt the air leave his lungs. His hands began to tremble, because he recognized her. Not from a passing glance, not from some vague memory. He recognized her from a night that had haunted him for 22 years, a night he had tried so hard to forget, but never could, a night that changed everything. "Sir," the young woman asked, tilting her head slightly, "is everything okay?" Marcus opened his mouth to speak, but no words came out. His throat tightened. His vision blurred with tears he hadn't cried in decades, because standing in front of him was the little girl he had pulled from a burning car on a cold December night 22 years ago, the baby he thought had died. The child he had mourned in silence, alone carrying the weight of that loss like a stone tied to his heart. She was alive, and she was standing right in front of him. To understand what happened in that food court, we need to go back to a time when Marcus Williams wasn't a janitor at a shopping mall, back to when he was a young man with dreams, with hope, and with a future that seemed as bright as the summer sun. Marcus was born in 1964 in a small town called Clearview, just 40 miles outside of Chicago. His father was a mechanic, his mother was a school teacher. They weren't rich, but they had love. And in that little house on Maple Street, love was enough. Marcus was the youngest of 3 brothers. His older siblings, David and Samuel, were athletic and popular. They played football and basketball, won trophies, and earned scholarships. But Marcus was different. He was quiet, thoughtful. He preferred books to balls, silence to crowds. While his brothers dreamed of stadiums, Marcus dreamed of saving lives. He wanted to be a doctor. From the age of 12, he knew that was his calling. He would spend hours at the local library reading medical journals he barely understood. He volunteered at the community clinic, helping the nurses carry supplies. He studied harder than anyone in his class and graduated high school with the highest grades Clearview had ever seen. When Marcus was accepted into a pre-med program at the University of Illinois, his mother cried tears of joy. His father shook his hand and said, "You're going to make us proud, son." And Marcus believed he would. He moved to Chicago with nothing but a suitcase, $50, and a heart full of hope. The city was loud and fast and overwhelming, but Marcus kept his head down and studied. He worked part-time jobs to pay for food. He slept in a tiny apartment with 3 roommates. And he never complained, because every struggle brought him one step closer to his dream. By the time he was 23, Marcus was in his 2nd year of medical school. He was exhausted, but he was thriving. His professors praised his dedication. His classmates respected his intelligence. And for the first time in his life, Marcus felt like he was exactly where he was supposed to be. But then came the night that changed everything. It was December 14th, 1987, a Sunday. Marcus had just finished a late-night study session at the library. The streets were quiet. Snow had started to fall, covering the city in a thin white blanket. He walked toward the bus stop, his breath visible in the cold air, his mind still running through the anatomy of the human heart. And then he heard it. A crash. Loud. Metal against metal. Glass shattering. Marcus turned toward the sound. 2 blocks away at an intersection, he saw it. A car had slammed into a streetlight. The front of the vehicle was crushed. Smoke poured from the engine. And inside the car, through the cracked windshield, he could see movement. Marcus ran. He didn't think. He didn't hesitate. His legs carried him faster than they ever had before. When he reached the car, the heat from the engine hit him like a wave. Flames were beginning to lick the edges of the hood. Inside, a woman was slumped over the steering wheel. Blood streamed down her forehead. She wasn't moving. And in the back seat, strapped into a car seat, was a baby. A tiny baby girl with wide eyes and a pink blanket wrapped around her. The baby was crying. Marcus pulled at the driver's door. It was jammed. He pulled again, harder. His muscles screamed. His hands burned against the cold metal, but the door wouldn't budge. He ran to the back door. It opened. He reached inside, his hands trembling, and unbuckled the car seat. The baby looked up at him with those wide, innocent eyes, and Marcus felt something shift in his chest. A connection, a bond, as if in that moment their souls touched. He pulled the baby from the car and ran. Seconds later, the engine exploded. The force of the blast threw Marcus forward. He hit the ground hard, curling his body around the baby to protect her. The heat scorched his back. Glass rained down around them. But the baby was safe. She was crying, but she was alive. Marcus looked back at the car. The woman inside never had a chance. Sirens wailed in the distance. Paramedics arrived. Police officers. Firefighters. The scene became a blur of flashing lights and shouting voices. Marcus handed the baby to a paramedic, his hands shaking, his eyes filled with tears. "Take care of her," he whispered. "Please, take care of her." The paramedic nodded and rushed the baby into an ambulance. And then Marcus collapsed onto the sidewalk, his body finally giving in to the shock. He woke up in a hospital bed 3 hours later. A police officer was sitting beside him. The man introduced himself as Officer Daniel Reeves. He explained that the woman in the car had been identified as Maria Santos, a 28-year-old single mother. She had been driving home from her night shift at a nursing home when she lost control of the vehicle on the icy road. Maria Santos was dead, but her daughter, a 10-month-old baby named Lily, was alive, thanks to Marcus. Marcus felt a wave of grief wash over him. He had saved the baby, but he couldn't save the mother. And that guilt, that unbearable weight, settled into his bones like a sickness he would never be able to cure. "You're a hero," Officer Reeves said. "You risked your life to save that child." But Marcus didn't feel like a hero. He felt like a failure, because in his mind he should have been faster. He should have opened that door. He should have saved them both. In the days that followed, Marcus learned more about Maria Santos. She had no family in Chicago. Her parents had passed away years earlier. The baby's father had abandoned them before Lily was even born. Maria had been alone, working double shifts just to keep a roof over their heads. And now she was gone. Marcus visited the hospital every day to see Lily. He held her in his arms, sang to her, told her stories about the brave mother who had loved her more than anything in the world. He became attached to that little girl in a way he couldn't explain, as if by saving her she had become a part of him. But then, on the 4th day, a social worker approached him. "Mr. Williams," she said, her voice cold and professional, "I need to inform you that Lily Santos has been placed in the custody of the state. She will be transferred to a foster care facility tomorrow." Marcus felt his heart stop. "What? No! She needs to stay here. She needs a stable home," the social worker interrupted. "And unfortunately, that's not something you can provide. You're a medical student with no income, no family in the city, and no legal claim to this child." Marcus wanted to argue. He wanted to fight. But he knew the social worker was right. He had nothing to offer Lily, no home, no money, no stability. He was barely surviving himself. So he did the only thing he could do. He said goodbye. He held Lily one last time, kissed her forehead, and whispered, "I'll never forget you, I promise. No matter where you go, no matter what happens, I'll carry you in my heart forever." The next morning, Lily was gone. Marcus tried to move on. He returned to medical school and threw himself into his studies. But something had changed. The fire that once burned inside him had dimmed. He couldn't concentrate. He couldn't sleep. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw Maria Santos slumped over that steering wheel. He saw Lily's wide, innocent eyes staring up at him from the flames. 2 months later, Marcus received a letter. It was from the foster care agency. The letter informed him that Lily Santos had been involved in a car accident while being transported to a new foster home. The vehicle had been struck by a truck on the highway. Lily had sustained severe injuries. She had not survived. Marcus read the letter 3 times. Then he collapsed onto his bed and wept. The baby he had saved. The child he had risked his life for. The little girl who had looked at him with those trusting eyes, she was dead. And Marcus Williams was broken. He dropped out of medical school the next week. He couldn't do it anymore. Every lecture about saving lives felt like a cruel joke. Every patient he saw reminded him of the lives he couldn't save. The dream that had carried him through years of struggle and sacrifice was gone, crushed beneath the weight of grief and guilt. Marcus returned to Clearview, to his parents' house, a shadow of the man he once was. He barely spoke. He barely ate. He spent his days staring out the window, watching the world move on without him. His mother tried to help. She cooked his favorite meals, played his favorite music, held him when he cried. But she couldn't heal the wound inside him. No one could. Years passed. His father died of a heart attack. His brothers moved away, started families of their own. His mother grew old and frail. And eventually she passed too, and Marcus was alone. He drifted from job to job, construction, delivery, warehouse work. He never stayed anywhere long. He never made friends. He never allowed himself to feel anything, because feeling meant remembering, and remembering meant pain. Eventually, he ended up in Riverside, a mid-sized city about 200 miles from Chicago. He found a job as a janitor at the local mall. The work was simple, mindless. It required nothing of him but his presence, and that was enough. For 20 years, Marcus cleaned floors, emptied trash cans, and watched the world pass him by. He saw children grow into teenagers, teenagers become adults, adults bring their own children to the same stores and food courts where their parents once shopped. Life moved in cycles. But Marcus remained frozen, trapped in a moment that happened 2 decades ago. He never married, never had children of his own. He couldn't, because every time he thought about starting a family, he thought about Lily, the daughter he never had, the child who died because of him, or so he believed. And now, on this ordinary Saturday afternoon, Marcus sat in the food court of Riverside Mall, staring at a young woman who had just asked to share his table, a young woman with dark brown hair, honey-colored eyes, and a prosthetic leg, a young woman named Lily. "Sir?" she asked again. "Are you okay? You look like you've seen a ghost." Marcus took a deep breath. His hands were still trembling. His heart was pounding so hard he could hear it in his ears. But he forced himself to speak. "Please," he said, his voice cracking, "sit down." Lily smiled and placed her tray on the table. She sat across from him, arranging her food carefully, a salad, a bottle of water, a small container of dressing. "Thank you," she said. "Every other table was taken, and I really didn't feel like eating standing up, not with this thing." She gestured toward her prosthetic leg. "It's amazing technology, but standing for too long still gets uncomfortable." Marcus nodded, barely hearing her words. He was studying her face, the shape of her nose, the curve of her smile, the way her eyes crinkled slightly when she laughed. It was her. He was certain of it. But how? How was this possible? The letter had said she died. The agency had confirmed it. For 22 years he had mourned her, carried her memory like a scar on his soul. "I'm sorry," Lily said, noticing his intense gaze. "Do I know you from somewhere? You keep looking at me like I've seen you before," Marcus finished. Lily tilted her head. "Yeah, exactly." Marcus didn't know what to say. How do you tell a stranger that you once pulled them from a burning car, that you've spent your entire life grieving for them, that their supposed passing had destroyed you in ways you never recovered from? But before he could figure it out, something happened. Lily reached into her bag and pulled out a small worn photograph. She placed it on the table between them. "This might sound crazy," she said, "but I've been looking for someone for a long time. And I have this old photo that was given to me when I turned 18. It's the only clue I have." Marcus looked at the photograph, and his breath caught in his throat. It was him, a younger version of himself, standing in a hospital hallway, holding a baby wrapped in a pink blanket, holding Lily. "Where did you get this?" Marcus whispered. Lily's eyes widened. "Wait, that's you?" Marcus nodded slowly. "That's me, 22 years ago, in a hospital in Chicago." Lily's hands flew to her mouth. Tears welled in her eyes. Oh my God, you're him. You're the man who saved me." Marcus couldn't hold back any more. The tears he had been fighting for decades spilled down his cheeks. "I thought you were gone, Lily. They told me you passed in a car accident. I've been carrying that grief for 22 years. Lily shook her head, crying now too. "I didn't pass. The accident happened, but I survived. I lost my leg, but I survived. The agency made a mistake, a clerical error. They reported me dead, but I was transferred to a different facility. I spent my childhood in foster care, never knowing who I really was or where I came from." Marcus reached across the table and took her hand. "I'm so sorry. I should have fought harder. I should have found you." "You couldn't have known," Lily said, squeezing his hand. "You saved my life. That night, you gave me a chance to live, and I've spent the last 4 years trying to find you, to thank you, to tell you that your sacrifice wasn't in vain." They sat in silence for a long moment, two strangers connected by fate, reunited by a miracle neither of them could have imagined. In the weeks that followed, Marcus and Lily spent every possible moment together. She told him about her life, the foster homes, some kind, some cruel, the surgeries on her leg, each one more painful than the last, the decision to amputate at age 14 after an infection that nearly took her life, the struggle to walk again with a prosthetic, the years of physical therapy, the determination that kept her going even when everything seemed impossible. But she also told him about the good things, the foster mother who taught her to read, the high school teacher who encouraged her to apply for college, the scholarship she earned to study social work so she could help children just like her, and the photograph, the only link to her past. "A nurse gave it to me when I aged out of the system," Lily explained. "She told me that a young man had taken this photo the night I was brought into the hospital. She said he visited me every day for a week, and that he cried when he had to say goodbye. She kept the photo all those years, hoping one day she could give it to me." Marcus listened, his heart swelling with emotion. This incredible young woman, this survivor, had overcome every obstacle life had thrown at her. She had lost her mother, her leg, her childhood, but she hadn't lost her spirit. She hadn't lost her hope. And now, against all odds, she had found him. Marcus told Lily his story, too. He told her about his dreams of becoming a doctor, about the night of the accident, about the guilt that consumed him when he couldn't save her mother, about the letter that said she was gone, and the devastation that followed. He told her about dropping out of medical school, about the decades of drifting, the loneliness, the emptiness, about the life he had lived as a ghost, haunted by a memory he could never escape. "I gave up," he admitted, his voice heavy with shame. "I gave up on everything, on my dreams, on myself, on the idea that I could ever make a difference. Lily took his hand and looked into his eyes. But you did make a difference, Marcus. You made the biggest difference in the world. You saved me. And because you saved me, I'm here. I'm alive. I'm studying to become a social worker so I can help children who have no one. Your sacrifice wasn't wasted. It became the foundation of everything I am. Marcus felt something shift inside him. A weight he had carried for 22 years began to lift. For the first time since that cold December night, he felt something other than grief. He felt hope. But their reunion was just the beginning. Lily had come to Riverside for a reason. She had tracked the photograph to a retired nurse who lived in the area. The nurse, whose name was Helen, had been the one to care for Lily in the hospital all those years ago. She was the one who had kept the photo and eventually passed it on. "Helen is dying," Lily said quietly. "Cancer. She has maybe a few months left." When I found her and showed her the photo, she broke down crying. She told me she had always hoped this day would come. She wanted to see both of us together before she goes. Marcus agreed without hesitation. They visited Helen in her small apartment the following Sunday. She was frail and thin, her body weakened by illness, but her eyes lit up when she saw them walk through the door. "Oh, my goodness," Helen whispered, tears streaming down her wrinkled cheeks. "It's really you, both of you." After all these years. Marcus sat beside her bed and took her hand. "Thank you, Helen, for keeping that photo, for never giving up on Lily." Helen smiled weakly. "I couldn't forget that little girl, or the young man who saved her. You were both so brave, so full of life. I prayed every day that you would find each other again." Lily knelt beside the bed and hugged Helen gently. "You made this possible. You gave me the only connection I had to my past. I'll never be able to thank you enough." Helen closed her eyes and sighed contentedly. "This is all I wanted. To see you together, to know that the story had a happy ending." She passed away 2 weeks later, peaceful and smiling, surrounded by the two people whose lives she had touched in ways she never fully understood. After Helen's passing, Marcus made a decision. For 22 years, he had been running from his past. He had hidden in the shadows, convinced that he had nothing left to offer the world. But Lily had shown him that wasn't true. She had shown him that his life had meaning, that his sacrifice had value, that he still had the power to make a difference. He was too old to become a doctor. That dream had passed. But he wasn't too old to help. Marcus enrolled in a community program to become a peer counselor for at-risk youth. He used his own story, his struggles, his failures, and his redemption to connect with young people who felt lost and alone. He visited schools and shelters, sharing his experience with anyone who would listen. And slowly, the broken man, who had spent decades cleaning floors, began to rebuild his life. But this story isn't just about Marcus. It's about the man Lily met on that fateful day she walked into the food court. 3 years after their reunion, Lily finished her degree in social work. She moved to Riverside permanently, taking a job at a local foster care agency, the same type of agency that had once failed her so profoundly. "I want to fix the system from the inside," she told Marcus. "I want to make sure no child ever falls through the cracks the way I did." And she did exactly that. Lily became a fierce advocate for foster children. She fought for better oversight, better training, better communication between agencies. She pushed for policies that prioritized the well-being of children over bureaucratic convenience. And she never, ever gave up. Her colleagues called her relentless. Her supervisors called her a troublemaker. But the children she helped called her something else. They called her Mom. Because Lily, the girl who had grown up without a family, had created a family of her own, not through biology, not through marriage, but through love. Over the years, she fostered dozens of children. Some stayed for a few months, some stayed for years. A few she adopted officially, becoming their legal mother. But to all of them, she was the same thing, a safe place, a guiding light, a reason to believe that they mattered. Marcus was there through all of it. He became a grandfather figure to Lily's foster children, the wise old man who told stories and gave advice and always had candy in his pockets. He attended birthday parties and graduations, basketball games, and piano recitals. He was part of a family for the first time in his life. And on his 70th birthday, Lily threw him a party. It was held at a community center that Marcus had helped renovate. Dozens of people attended, children he had mentored, families Lily had helped, neighbors and friends who had become his extended family over the years. Lily stood before the crowd and gave a speech. 29 years ago, she said, her voice steady but emotional, a young man pulled a baby from a burning car. He didn't know that baby. He had no obligation to risk his life, but he did it anyway, because that's who he is, a man who sees someone in need and runs toward the danger instead of away from it. She paused, wiping a tear from her eye. For 22 years, that man believed I was gone. He carried that grief like a stone around his neck. He gave up on his dreams, on his future, on himself. But he never gave up on his kindness. Even at his lowest, he treated people with dignity and respect. He smiled at strangers. He helped when he could. He kept the light inside him burning, even when he thought no one could see it. Lily turned to Marcus, who sat in the front row with tears streaming down his face. Marcus Williams, you are my hero, not because you saved my life, but because you showed me what it means to be a good person, even when life is hard. You showed me that kindness matters, that sacrifice matters, that love matters, and I will spend the rest of my life trying to live up to your example. The crowd erupted in applause. Marcus stood, his legs shaky, his heart full. He walked to the front of the room and embraced Lily, holding her tight as the cheers surrounded them. Thank you, he whispered into her ear. Thank you for finding me. Thank you for giving me a reason to live. Lily pulled back and smiled. No, Marcus. Thank you for giving me a life to live in the first place. Years passed. Marcus grew older. His body weakened, as all bodies do. But his spirit remained strong. He continued mentoring young people well into his 70s, even when he had to do it from a wheelchair. He continued visiting Lily's foster children, telling them stories about bravery and hope and the power of never giving up. And when he finally closed his eyes for the last time, at the age of 84, he did so surrounded by love. Lily was there, holding his hand. So were her children, biological and foster alike. So were the countless lives he had touched over the decades, the young people who had grown into adults, the families he had helped create, the community he had become a part of. His funeral was standing room only. Person after person stood up to share stories about Marcus Williams, the janitor who had never forgotten his humanity, the man who had lost everything and found it again, the quiet hero who had changed more lives than he ever realized. And when it was Lily's turn to speak, she said only this. 22 years ago, a stranger asked me if she could share my table, and in that moment, my entire life changed. I found the man who saved me, the man who believed in me before I believed in myself, the man who showed me that family isn't about blood, it's about love. She paused, looking at the photograph in her hands. The same worn photograph that had started it all. A young man in a hospital hallway, holding a baby wrapped in a pink blanket. Marcus Williams wasn't my biological father, but he was my dad in every way that mattered, and I will carry him in my heart forever. If you're still here, listening to this story, there's a reason. Maybe you're struggling with guilt over something you couldn't control. Maybe you're carrying a burden that feels too heavy to bear. Maybe you've given up on your dreams, on yourself, on the idea that things could ever get better. But here's the truth. You never know how your story is going to end. Marcus Williams thought his story ended the night he received that letter. He thought the baby he saved was gone, and with her, any hope of redemption. But he was wrong. 22 years later, that baby walked into a food court and changed everything. Life is full of twists we can't predict, reunions we never expected, miracles we didn't think were possible. But they can only happen if we keep going, if we keep showing up, if we keep the light inside us burning even when we think no one can see it, because someone can see it. Someone is watching. Someone's life is about to change because of something you did, or something you will do, or something as simple as letting a stranger share your table. So don't give up, not on your dreams, not on yourself, not on the possibility that something wonderful is waiting just around the corner, because it might be. And when it arrives, you'll want to be there to meet it. Can I share this table? 5 simple words, and they change 2 lives forever.